Alright, get this. So this girl, I could not get her away from me. I grew up with her, she was in love with me. I'm talking years, basically following me around like a lost puppy. Well, you know what? After all the peer pressure, I finally decided to give her a chance. So, long story short, we end up getting married. Sounds like a happy story, right? Oh no! She is now going behind my back and telling the utmost dirty lies to all the people I know. My parents wanted to prepare me for life at a very young age. I knew how to read and multiply long before my peers, and by 3rd grade I was making my first classroom sales, selling glitter chalk like it was the 8th wonder of the world. While that gave me a good perspective on how to make a living, it cost me a big aspect that also matters in business: social status. I grew up and went through all the academic stages without someone I could truly call a friend, and my social circle was very closed. It was mostly women because I felt they understood me. With all the men I knew, they were always an issue of jealousy and envy. Them saying, and I quote, "Ugh, this guy makes more money than me, therefore he's an enemy." When the reality is that I just wanted to share a couple of drinks with them while we talked about soccer. I think it also matters that I grew up with only older sisters, so I got along well with the female sex, and contrary to what you may think, no, they weren't looking for me out of interest. Because at the slightest sign of money grabbing, I preferred to go out with my head held high rather than go through some humiliation. I was good at business and at keeping my pride above all else. I started my business right out of college. I got out in my early 20s, and by then I can say that I only frequented at least 20 people. Coincidentally, there were few but loyal, and I didn't feel any backstabbing when I commented on my new ventures. Still, every one of them had their social circle which I respected, and it was when I was introduced to acquaintance number, 21, that things changed. Jane was younger than me, still in high school when we met, but I know she was deeply in love. Well, I didn't pay much attention to her at the time because, I repeat, she was a minor. And even if she was a contemporary, my mind wasn't for that sort of thing. I even considered at one point that I was asexual or something, because I didn't like or care for any romantic interaction with another person. But with Jane, well, that changed as the years went by. I can be very naive about many things, not understanding various social protocols, but as the years went by, it became increasingly apparent that Jane was deeply attracted to me. Whether it was my money, my charisma, or my introverted nature, there was something about me that motivated her to write to me at least 9 times a week. At times it felt very overwhelming, but out of politeness I would just let it go. My sister would tell me to set limits, because letting her do all that was giving false hope to an increasingly delusional girl. At get-togethers with girlfriends, she would come on to me a lot, and I would politely disengage, and at a certain point I thought it had worked because there was a time when she seemed to pull away from me. I assumed it was during her college days when she focused quite a bit on studying, and had straight A's, but once it was all over, she came straight back to me. It may sound a bit harsh, but it was a quiet time, where my business prospered quite a bit and I was able to further advance my ventures. Once I graduated, Jane came straight back to me, frequenting my group of friends and inviting me to almost every event she could. On many occasions, I turned her down, telling her that I should be doing other things, but this caused the opposite effect, and made her more interested in me. At one point, one of my sisters said to me, "Why don't you go out with her? She might be different in how she usually is when you go on a date." She also asked me what I thought of her, and by then, I didn't have any bad thoughts. "Well, she's kind of annoying," was all I would say. But other than that, she was just another average girl. Very pretty, Sure, but as I told them, there seemed to be something strange about me that wouldn't let me see her with a different eye. Another sister told me to go out with her and maybe the date would go so badly that even she would stay away from me after it. It was like achieving, again, the opposite effect. Once we get what we wanted so much, we realize we don't want it anymore. Well, that's what they say, right? Like these stories where the hero gets his revenge and realizes he's still just as empty. Maybe the girl just liked chasing me, but not the fact of having me. So, I agreed to go out with her once and for all. Although I think I made a slight mistake in the process. I was the one who asked her out. I was a little anxious, nervous that the plan would work out and that I would finally not have the presence by my side all the time. The date, as I recall, turned out pretty good, actually. As my sister said, it was a completely different perspective, and we both enjoyed seeing Jane with different eyes on that for one occasion. After that, she insisted on going out again, and out of politeness, I said yes. That's how our history of going out began, where at the end of each one, she would ask me if I wanted to do it again. One thing led to another, and we ended up formalizing a sort of something, and many could tell. My sisters, older and supposedly wiser, told me that I had to take care of that relationship, as I've spent my whole life going from business to business, prioritizing money. So I had to focus now on something else. Not only having found love, but on keeping it. Over the next few months, our so-called love blossomed by leaps and bounds, with her being a part of basically every aspect of my life, and even though she had her social circle outside of mine, she always preferred to take me with her, as if I was some sort of keychain. I already felt like a trophy husband before I even wore the ring, which happened in less than a year of being together. Under pressure from my sisters and Jane herself, of course, I found myself at the jewelry store buying a ring. Getting down on one knee at dinner and asking the girl to join me in holy matrimony. I don't think I even finished the sentence when she was already hugging me saying, yes, 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 I do. I admit I felt a bit of joy, though it was hard for me to describe. The season before the wedding was chaotic, and although I feel like I didn't have much to do with the organization, everyone congratulated me and extended their arm for such a beautiful engagement. In a twisted way, I told myself that getting a wife would help me even get my business better, to give the public a friendlier image and thus generate a trustworthy image when choosing us. Does that sound horrible coming from me? I can say that there were feelings of love and affection for my wife, just not as effusively as one would expect. We had a good honeymoon, and I think that's precisely where Charlie was conceived. That's right. Our son came as a surprise a few weeks later, and Jane was the happiest person in the world, and I guess I was too. Seeing my son once he was born changed my perspective on many things. It was as if they triggered a switch in my soul, giving me a reason to be thankful to be alive. Jane took a back seat for just a few moments, only to see her with all the love and affection in the world of being able to help, and even push me to have Charlie. I felt fulfilled. It was then that our home life began, which, thanks to all my efforts in business, could be much lighter and more profitable than that of most people. My parents helped me from a young age by understanding the value of money, and I wanted the same for my son so that he could have a decent and fair life when he grew up. Jane, on the other hand, when Charlie was already 2 years old, started to have a 180-degree turn, leaving a little bit of the annoying side she used to have and changing it for a more materialistic, superficial, and vain one. She used to go out with her friends for nights on end, leaving me to do the housework and chores and take care of Charlie. She also insisted on getting a babysitter, but I flatly refused, as it would be a waste of money we might as well save. We often quarreled over the handling of the finances, and she went so far as to call me miserable, just for not looking for a bigger house for the family since we already had an apartment large enough to meet our needs. She used to say, "Think big. We must improve our lifestyle." And my blood boiled every time she mentioned things like that. Did I tell you she didn't work? Or, well, she didn't go back to her job since we had Charlie. And even she, with all the free time that she has, is unable to be able to help me just a little bit in the house. I think I'm getting a little off topic already, but it's just because it's annoying how everything has unfolded. I decided to write this because the last few days have not exactly been easy, and I'm afraid that something bad is going to happen. Years ago, I went to a therapeutic writing workshop, and they taught me that momentary feelings can be purged by writing at the exact moment you feel unhappy. I may not get to read this again, but at least it's good to get it off my chest. It's like a friend you can't see, but who's there for you no matter what. Update number 1. I recently hired a new employee at work, a nice girl, fresh out of college with an interesting resume. From the beginning, she seemed to be a very good choice for the company, so I did not hesitate to hire her. Now, let me explain something about my company. Not only have I worked hard to have good economic stability, but I've also studied and analyzed the strategies that a boss should have when dealing with his employees. Years ago, I read stories on the internet about abusive and exploitative bosses who ruin the motivation of young people when their careers also. So I didn't want that to fall into my category. That was why some social gatherings were organized in the business offices, where workers would bring something to share and have meals together. This girl, Rebecca, adapted well to the workspace, and everyone opened their hands to make her feel at home. She used to help me with my activities and was very attentive to all the details happening in the company, making assessments and diagnoses that would help us in the long run. Regarding my family, I heard from other employees that she considered my family the perfect American dream, and that she hoped to achieve it someday. That made me feel pretty good, I admit, and it was the first time I realized how good it felt to be in a family. To have worked so hard for it, and then to have achieved it. Anyways, a few days ago, everything I just wrote changed, and Rebecca's attitude went from friendly to somewhat hostile. No, I don't think that's the term, but she stopped being somewhat close, or at least with me. At one of these meetings, she seemed distant from me, barely speaking, and the following week, at a meeting where I was absent, she seemed to be nice, in a good mood with the others, only for me to return and the cold attitude to come back. Why? I wondered. I was slyly trying to ask the other employees to see if they could help me figure out what was going on with the girl. It sounded rather strange that I care what someone thinks of me, since it's never been my main interest throughout my life. But I felt as if I had done something wrong without knowing it. And being a person who's quite meticulous about my things, you will understand how strange I felt. In one of the conversations with one of my employees, he told me that Rebecca was a little weirded out by my certain rumors that she heard about me. Rumors that came from outside the office. I had mixed feelings about this. It was a kind of confusion and anger, as I didn't know what he meant by these rumors. I stand out for being a methodical person, and always involved in my things. Drama and social conflicts are tedious for me to deal with, hence the small number of friendships I have. So, hearing that there's something weird going on around me makes me noise. I tried to get to the bottom of the situation, but no employee would tell me a thing. So I plucked up the courage and decided to ask the source of it all. I called Rebecca into my office, and from the start she seemed a little uncomfortable and quiet. I greeted her politely and said, "Excuse me, Rebecca, but I'll get right to the point. For the past few days I've noticed a change in your attitude towards me. This would go beyond work. From what I understand, and the last thing I would want is a work environment where somebody would feel uncomfortable. So, you can tell me what's going on, Rebecca. In fact, I'm even curious to know, as I don't know if anything in particular has happened. However, we are adults, and we can discuss it without any problems. Well, her response was, "Nothing's going on," leaving me in the void after some mild prodding. Seeing that the girl could not avoid the opportunity for gossip, she explained that she heard certain comments from people in common, so at the time she was taking reservations when dealing with me. Rebecca came to work on the recommendation of one of my few friends, Liana, an old classmate of mine who I sometimes go out with for meetings, and I figured that maybe she would know better what was going on. Coincidentally, the following weekend we were having a party, so it was going to be a good time to ask her without sounding too desperate. Jane stayed home that night because Charlie wasn't feeling quite right. I felt a little bad about leaving them alone, but she insisted that I go out, as I had been so stressed lately. Almost against my will, I went and ran into Liana, whom I immediately tackled. I asked her about it, but she said she was equally confused. For some time, she had heard some strange comments about me and Jane, but she wasn't sure what it was about. She told me that, and I quote, "Alan must know something about it." Alan is one of those guys who always hangs around in our close circle, who also has at the party, so I went to ask him. At this point, I felt like I was in a game of cats and mice, trying to find an answer to what was being said about me. Alan was a bit drunk, a bit upset, and he was on the terrace with another group of people. I slyly joined him, and between conversations, he effusively remarked on me. However, the conversation took a slightly sharper turn, and he started talking about Jane. He said something that really upset me and got my attention, and I quote, "Hey man, I used to really respect you before, but this thing with your booby-trapping Jane and badgering her to marry you was something that you disappointed us all, because we didn't think you were like that." Well, naturally, I asked him what he meant, and he told me that Jane did not make my tone, as he clearly knew how he sought after Jane was at the time, and that, quote, "Like a bird of prey, I swooped down on her without letting her breathe," knowing that many of our group friends, and even acquaintances, wanted and tried to court her. I was speechless, but tried to remain as calm as I could, playing along. When I returned home the next day, I found Jane making breakfast, so I made conversation with her and told her about the things I've heard. She pretended to be oblivious and even said, "That's ridiculous. Everyone should know that I was the one who threw herself at you for years. You drove me crazy." I smiled nervously and went on with my work. The next day at the office, I noticed how some of my employees seemed to be mumbling more than usual, and avoiding my face when I turned to look at them. Rebecca's attitude remained the same as ever, to the point where I thought it's gotten worse. I felt like I was in a school where everyone knew the gossip except the teacher, and it's begun to affect me emotionally and even physically at this point. Now I get headaches at noon, and if I don't take a pill for it, it'll last until I get home, where I can't fall asleep because of the thousands of thoughts that rumble amongst my head, all of which converge in the same slogan. Who could have invented that rumor? Update number 2. At first, I thought it was some ex of Jane's or something, even though she herself assured me she had never had a partner in her life. False, there was one, but it was a couple of weeks in college, and she tells me it was no big deal. Besides, the guy's no longer in the country, so it's impossible for him to spread a rumor like that. Or even someone envious of our relationship, and that Jane has never paid attention to. But just a few days ago, I found out the truth. And let me tell you that I would have preferred the first options I just mentioned. I decided to not write the new update until I confirmed it, but I already did, and I'm shaking with rage as I do this. It was Jane herself who started this ugly rumor. I found out about it from Liana and Samantha, Jane's best friend, and it was all because the former told me in a scheduled meeting that I would be told about a somewhat uncomfortable situation that's been going on for some time. Apparently, in the meetings between friends, Jane began to talk about the beginnings of our relationship and about how desperate I was at the time of courting her. Of course, all this was a lie, as she herself admitted the opposite was true. But both Samantha and Liana told them that she was very confident in her words. Samantha told me her exact words, and I quote, "Yeah, sure, that was when I was barely out of high school, that he pounced on me like a lion on a gazelle, taking advantage of my innocence, but in the end he came out on top and left my line of followers on a wait list." She also mentioned of how I was the one desperate to have a baby too. Confirmed that she was my property, is what she said. And the very idea of that thought makes me sick to my stomach, to the point of almost vomiting. I confess something I'm not very proud of, and is that at the time I thought Samantha and Liana were faking it all, and because I couldn't believe that my wife would say such an outrageous thing. And according to the girls, it wasn't the first time. This had been going on for a while when Jane had been going out more after 5 years in the field of motherhood. I think she was feeling flirtatious, and a story like that might give her an air of being desired, along the lines of, "I'm a tough nut to crack, and I had my husband, a successful businessman, drooling over me." Ugh. Honestly, and without falling a bit into low self-esteem, I wouldn't mind if she said a little thing or two to make herself feel big in front of others. But for her to do it at my expense and lie to my face as she denied saying anything, and she would do it at my expense just to boost her ego. And therein lies the problem. Samantha and Liana swallowed their feminine pride and preferred to tell me because they knew the background and knew better. Samantha even tried to confront Jane, asking her why she was lying to others. You know what my wife said? "Don't worry, it's not like she's very wrong either. If there's one thing I hate, it's liars, but even worse are people who lie and let others down in the process." I'm planning on confronting Jane and telling her everything I know, but I have to be very careful about it because I don't want her to feel aggravated or anything. Although, in a way, she deserves some sort of a wake-up call. I will explain to her that these false testimonies she's giving are making me look very bad in front of many people, and that may even hurt my work dynamics, a little bit at least. No one likes a man who comes across as desperate, as it'll make you lose your sense of power in front of other employees. I tried to talk to her yesterday, but just Charlie had a major evaluation in kindergarten, and he's falling a little behind average, so we took turns helping him. I don't like to have this situation play out in front of our little man, as I want to keep him as far away as possible from any conflict his parents might get into. Listen to me. Talking about conflict when it's just stupid and that's it, maybe I'm getting a lot of ideas and she's super receptive on the subject. By the next update, I hope I'll be laughing about it all. Update number 3. No, I'm not laughing. I'm crying. Because, well, it's not as easy to cope with a divorce, but these are the things that happen when two people are not getting along. Or, in my case, when one person starts spreading rumors about the other, affecting their job performance. Next up, the conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, as I told you, I faced Jane asking her about everything that happened. And when she tried to deny everything, I persisted until she finally stated, and I quote, "Well, yes, I admit I said a couple things, but it's just that we got married while we were very young. And I feel like I didn't give myself that teenage stage of experimentation." Of course, my anger was mounting as I told her that she was the one who sought me in the beginning. She cried, and I don't know, like a wet stuffed animal, couldn't do anything about it. We let the matter drop and went on about our business. Sometime later, all ready to get the real conflict of the matter, I received a business proposal from a company that was emerging in the city. I won't go into much details about the business. I'll just say that they had an advertising package like no other I've ever seen, and that it was going to benefit us quite a bit in the short term. Anyways, we set up a meeting with the owner of the company on a Tuesday, I remember, and when she walked in the door, I can swear to you how the woman's expression went from a smile to a deadpan grimace after seeing me. It was subtle, but I could tell, and the rest of the conversation went from bad to worse. She felt as if she's been a ghost, and her spirits faded to nothing. Is it worth saying that nothing materialized? She was very defensive and reluctant to make any overtures. A week later, I contacted one of her assistants, and he told me that she had been reluctant to move forward because of certain comments that she heard from me. When I asked, she said, and I quote, "The day before I had heard from one of your friends that you were desperate to court your wife when she was still in high school." One day earlier, Jane, who knew this woman, apparently had told her one day before about it. Having promised not to mention the subject anymore and now ruining a very good business deal I had in hand, when I confronted her upon returning to the house, she shielded herself by saying she didn't know the girl was going to have a business meeting with me. But I told her it didn't matter. As I was upset, it was because she had broken her promise, and once again, the situation seemed to affect me. And the worst part is that I had no idea how far-reaching those comments could be. We're talking about Jane must have told countless people, leaving me in a bad light just to inflate her ego. That's when I absolutely exploded, and got a little bit rude. I tried to yell as little as possible for Charlie's sake, but I told Jane that she could not expect to get away with it all the time, as it was bad enough that I had to put up with her for years after me, hardly letting me breathe. I don't know if what I said was too much, but it was what I felt at the moment. She asked me if I loved her at some point, and that's when the conversation became very tense. How do you tell another person a horrible truth? I didn't feel entirely bad, as it was confessing and purging my feelings from years ago. Something I longed to do, and it led to what we both knew. Actually, I was the one who filed for divorce, and she stomped, screamed, and fought to keep it from happening. But ultimately, it had to be considered, as I could not stay under the same roof as a person who engaged in bad-mouthing behind my back. I looked up to the lawyers and everything, and she used Charlie as an excuse, making comments about how I was destroying my own family. But I would come back saying that for once I would be doing what I should have done years ago, being true to myself, not letting myself be manipulated by her. That had cost me dearly, and I would no longer make that mistake, because it was time to focus on what I wanted, without any stumbling blocks along the way. Sure, it would be bitter for our son, but I'm more than clear that parenting, at least on my part, won't be a problem, as he will continue to receive the support and affection he deserves. I don't know if I'll get to release a new update, but I have no fear. I will make sure everything goes well. Update number 4. And this one took a few years to release. Here's the final update. Hey guys, well, I hope all's well. It's been a long time since I've written, it's been a couple years. I just stopped by to comment a bit on the outcome of the story I had with my ex-wife Jane. Well, there's not much to say. I won't go into the legal issues and problems she put me through. I'll just say that I walked away from her and that I was rather lucky, as I later learned the kind of person I would be with the rest of my life. After we divorced, she did what she did best: make up rumors about me. She started saying that I cheated on her with a prostitute, and that I had impulsively dumped her. Something that was conflicting at first, but then her web of lies fell apart in the most satisfying way possible. And that's because I started dating Samantha, her ex-best friend. She started saying that she was the one I cheated on her with, but people remembered that she had said she was a prostitute. So they understood that Jane was not to be trusted from the get-go. And in this magical snowball effect, they ended up not believing anything she said. They even stopped believing her that I was desperate to be with her in the first place, as it showed after the breakup how badly she was doing. Financially, of course, mainly. I was the one who provided for the house, and without me, she even had to go back to her parents. Spending all this time unemployed, since she could not manage to keep anything stable. So the conclusion to the story is this. Liars get what they deserve sooner or later. While it does give me some pain, I continue to strive for a good, quiet life. Samantha has helped me a lot in the process, and has been the support that Jane never was. Charlie's now in elementary school, and is adjusting well to the idea of a new mother, with whom he gets along great with. What can I say? Those who preserve will catch up, I guess. This story kinda threw me for a loop. I didn't really understand what Jane was trying to accomplish by basically throwing her husband underneath the bus. She was chasing him the entire childhood, and he decides to give her a chance, and she goes behind his back and just does something that doesn't make a bunch of sense. She starts lying and saying all this false stuff about how he was basically waiting for her to turn 18, and blah blah blah. None of it was true. And in the end, we finally found out exactly what happened. Guys, let me know what you think about that story, but I do want to hear from you. If you were in OP's position, and you finally give this girl a chance, well, and it turned out the way it did, what would you have done differently? And maybe you yourself have been in a situation similar to this. Go ahead, drop your comments down below. Let's discuss it. Guys, thank you for joining me on today's video. My name's Mr. Reddito. I cover stories every single day. All the type of content that goes with drama. I'm talking inheritance stories, Karen stories, mother-in-law disputes. Every single thing that you can imagine, we probably cover it. So go ahead and check out the channel. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a fantastic day.